My name is Daniel Carter, and if you've ever had a sentence slice into your chest so deep that it kept echoing in your ears long after it was spoken, you'll understand what I went through. I'm 35, born and raised in Texas, the kind of man who wakes up before the sun, pours black coffee into a chipped Dallas Cowboys mug, and pulls on steel-toe boots before the rest of the neighborhood's alarm clocks even buzz. I drive a beat-up Ford F-150 with a dent on the passenger side from hauling lumber the wrong way around a corner, and I work in construction management. My life has never been flashy, but it's honest, and for years I thought that was enough for my wife, Emily. We'd been married almost 8 years. Emily was smart, ambitious, the kind of woman who could walk into a corporate boardroom in heels and have everyone scrambling to catch up to her ideas. Where I was simple, she was polished. Where I was hands-on, she was strategic. I thought we balanced each other out. She had my back, and I had hers, or so I believed. That night, the night that gutted me, it was just the two of us sitting in our kitchen in Dallas. The clock above the stove read 10:43 p.m., and I remember because the microwave kept flashing the same time. I'd been trying to talk to her about our future, about maybe putting some money aside for a down payment on a plot of land outside the city. Nothing fancy, just enough to build a house we could actually call our own. She sighed, rolled her eyes, and pushed her wine glass across the counter, as though the conversation itself was exhausting, and then she said it. Cold, sharp, final. You don't have what it takes to lead, Daniel. My ex-boyfriend outshines you in every way. For a moment, I thought I misheard her. Maybe the clink of ice in the glass distorted her words. But she repeated it, slower this time, enunciating each syllable like she wanted them tattooed into my memory. The room shrank, the hum of the refrigerator grew louder, and my throat closed up like I'd swallowed sand. Leadership wasn't just a word, it was my identity. Men like me were raised to believe we lead our families, protect them, provide for them. To have my own wife say I wasn't enough, that some ghost from her past was a better man, it hit harder than any betrayal I could imagine. I didn't yell, I didn't slam the table or storm out. I just sat there, staring at the little crack in our kitchen tile, wondering how long she'd been holding on to that thought. Had it been weeks, months? Had she compared me to him every time I struggled, every time I came home sweaty and dirty, while she scrolled through her emails on the couch? My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped me out and left nothing but a shell. That night, she went to bed without looking back, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I drove to a Whataburger at midnight, just to get out of the house, ordered a patty melt, and sat in the parking lot staring at the neon lights reflecting off my windshield. Every bite tasted like cardboard, and the phrase kept looping in my head. You don't have what it takes to lead. Over the next few weeks, I noticed changes I had been too blind to catch before. Emily was always working late. Her phone, once left on the counter without a care, was now glued to her hand. She turned it face down when she wasn't using it, her thumb guarding the screen like it held nuclear codes. When I asked simple questions, where she'd been, who she'd talked to, she dismissed me with a sigh, telling me I was being paranoid. But that sentence she dropped in the kitchen had opened my eyes. I couldn't unhear it. And paranoia? It started to feel less like a flaw and more like survival. Sunday dinners with my folks became a battlefield of silence. My mom would ask if everything was okay, noticing the tension in my shoulders, the way Emily avoided holding my hand at the table. I lied, said work was stressful, but the truth was, I was drowning in my own marriage. Even at work, I caught myself drifting. I'd be reviewing blueprints with the crew, but all I could see was Emily's face as she told me I wasn't enough. The foreman had to nudge me back into focus more than once. I could feel my authority slipping at work too, all because I couldn't shake those words. One night, I found myself scrolling through old Facebook photos of Emily with her so-called ex. The guy was exactly what you'd expect from a Friday Night Lights cliché. High school quarterback, perfect teeth, later went off to get some shiny executive job in Houston. Standing next to him, Emily glowed in those pictures. She looked at him the way she hadn't looked at me in years. I hated myself for even looking, but I couldn't stop. Was this the man she was secretly comparing me to every day? Was this the leader she thought I'd never measure up to? I started second-guessing everything. My clothes felt too plain, my truck too old, my job too blue-collar. I wondered if she was embarrassed to introduce me to her colleagues, if she cringed when I showed up in boots while her friends' husbands wore polished loafers. Every little thing turned into evidence against me. It wasn't just about another man. It was about the foundation of who I was, and whether it had ever been enough for her. I didn't tell anyone the truth, not even my closest friend, Mark, who I usually grabbed a beer with at Twin Peaks on Fridays. How could I? How could I look him in the eye and say, "My wife thinks I'm not a man"? So I bottled it up, carried it like a stone in my chest. But stones grind you down over time, and I could feel the weight pressing heavier with each passing day. Looking back, that was the night my marriage truly ended. Not the night I caught her texting him, not the night I saw the hotel charge on our joint credit card. It ended the moment she looked at me across that kitchen counter and told me I wasn't enough. Everything else that followed, every suspicion, every lie, every late-night drive around the city hoping to catch her slipping, was just the echo of that moment. I didn't know it then, but the story of my downfall and my revenge had already begun. The first time I saw the hotel charge, it was a Tuesday, the kind of hot Dallas evening, where the asphalt breathes heat long after sunset. I was sitting at the kitchen table again, the same spot where Emily's words had carved that invisible scar across my chest, logging into our joint credit card portal to pay the balance. I don't usually pry, never needed to, but marriage teaches you rhythms, and when a rhythm stutters, you hear it. There it was. The Ritz-Carlton Dallas. Not a dinner charge, not a spa. Lodging. The timestamp read 5:42 p.m., which made less than 0 cents because she was supposedly stuck at an emergency strategy session until 8. I didn't confront her that night. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred, then closed the laptop and stared at the dark window where my reflection sat looking like a man already halfway disappeared. When she came home around 9, carrying the smell of expensive perfume and elevator air, she kissed my cheek, told me she was exhausted, and went to shower. I sat there listening to the water drum the tile, and for the first time, I let the thought in without dressing it in excuses. She could be cheating. I started small, phone bills, Uber receipts. She'd switched to using her work Uber, but a couple of charges still slipped through to our card, short rides along Pearl Street and McKinney Avenue, always between 5 and 7, always clustered near places where offices faded into bars. I drove those routes the next night, just to see them with my own eyes. Neon. Valets waving down SUVs. Women in pencil skirts walking in and out of glass doors with that after-hours kind of laughter. I tried to convince myself she was networking. I tried hard. 2 days later, I found a receipt in her blazer pocket when I was hanging it back up. A careless move on her part, or a dare. Sullivan's Steakhouse, 2 martinis, oysters, a ribeye, and a bread pudding the size of my fist. I pressed the thin paper under my thumb like it might bleed a truth if I squeezed hard enough. There was a smear of lipstick on the margin where a woman's hand might have held it while signing the bill. The tip was generous. The signature was not hers. It was a man's, looping and confident, the kind of handwriting you learn when life always says yes. The next time she told me she had to stay late, I didn't tell her I'd already installed a tiny location-sharing app on her old iPad, a device she'd forgotten we owned because it had a crack through the corner of the screen and lived in the hall closet like a retired soldier. It wasn't something I'm proud of. It felt wrong. But her sentence had turned our marriage into a courtroom, and I needed evidence. Around 6, the little beacon that was her phone slid north, past Victory Park, then settled like a bird on a balcony at a familiar pin. The Ritz. I didn't even grab a jacket. I drove straight there in the Ford with my heart beating loud enough to rattle the dashboard. The valet looked at me like my truck had wandered into the wrong movie. Inside, soft jazz and low voices, the smell of old wood and new money. I walked past the lobby bar like I knew where I was going, landed on a bench near the elevators, and pretended to scroll my phone while my eyes scanned every face that came and went. At 6:27, I saw her. Emily in a navy sheath dress, hair smooth, lipstick sharpened like a blade. She wasn't alone. He was taller than me, sandy hair, jaw cut by a geometry teacher, wearing a suit that cost more than my mortgage payments. The ex. I recognized him from those high school and reunion photos, except now he'd grown into the kind of man who always owns the room by accident. He laughed softly at something she said and touched the small of her back like it was his jurisdiction. I didn't move. I watched them walk to the elevators. She glanced around once, the way a person does when they're about to cross a line they swore to everyone they'd never even approach. The elevator doors opened, and the two of them stepped inside. She stood close, not touching, but the space between them felt like a secret already told. The doors slid shut, and my chest folded inward on itself. I sat there until the lobby blurred, until the concierge gave me the kind of concerned nod they give men who look like their lives just ran into a wall. I didn't follow them up. There are some boundaries you don't cross because you know, once you do, there's no way back. Instead, I walked out, got in my truck, and drove until the skyline became a ribbon of light, stretched thin in the rear view. I ended up at a 24-hour car wash behind a shuttered strip mall, just sitting in the bay with the engine off, the night pressing in from all sides. I remember thinking that this is how men lose themselves, not through a single blow, but through a steady run of small cuts they keep hidden until one day they bleed out. The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in years. I sat at our kitchen table gathering what I now realized I would need: screenshots of the credit card hotel charge, a photo of the receipt with that anonymous king's signature, a map of the locations, the timestamps. I hired a private investigator by noon. It felt like an admission, like saying the word you've avoided, infidelity, out loud in a small room where the echo never stops. The PI was a woman named Grace. She had a dry voice and the kind of patience that seemed to have been polished by watching too many people lie to themselves. "I'll get you what you need," she said, "if there's anything to get." For a week, I tried to act normal. I kissed Emily's forehead in the mornings, fixed the squeak in the pantry door, took out the trash on Thursdays like I always did, even texted her, "Drive safe," when she left the office. She replied with gifts and hearts like we were teenagers. But I watched her phone guard her like a bodyguard. I watched her laugh at messages that weren't mine. I watched her look in the mirror longer than necessary before leaving, the way a woman does when she's dressing for a verdict. On Friday, Grace called. "You're going to want to meet me," she said. We met at a coffee shop off Central, the kind with Edison bulbs and brick walls and baristas who spell your name like it's a riddle. She slid a manila envelope across the table and let me open it without commentary. Inside were photos. Emily entering a hotel, Emily at a corner table in a dim restaurant, Emily's hand on his sleeve, him leaning in, her smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. There was a shot of the two of them in the parking garage, not kissing, but close enough that the air between their mouths looked like a promise. A parking ticket copy, another receipt, dates, times, places, evidence. They were careful, Grace said, but not careful enough. I didn't cry. I thought I might. Instead, I felt a cold clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. It's like standing ankle deep in a river you've fished your whole life and suddenly realizing the current's been flowing in the opposite direction all along. The ache was still there, but it had edges now. Edges can be useful. You can cut things with edges. I thanked Grace, paid her more than she asked, and drove to work because the only thing that made sense in that moment was to stand where people expected me to stand and prove, if only to myself, that I still existed. At the site, the guys needed a problem solved. An overpour had shifted a form, and the slab measurements were off by a half-inch. I took a breath, looked, measured, and told them how we'd fix it without wasting a day. When it worked, the crew nodded in that quiet way men do when someone shows up and handles business. Standing there with dust in my lungs and sun burning the back of my neck, I realized something Emily had never understood. Leadership doesn't always look like a corner office and a platinum card. Sometimes it looks like knowing which line to snap, which measurement to trust, which man to put where so the whole thing stands. Sometimes it looks like a guy in boots who refuses to let a bad pour ruin the foundation. That night, Emily came home late again. She smelled like the lobby of a place that would never let my truck pull up out front. She asked what was for dinner, like nothing in our world had shifted an inch. I told her I'd already eaten. She didn't ask with whom. She talked about a pitch, about an investor, about a new position her boss hinted at, something like Associate VP of Strategy. She smiled as she spoke, and I wondered if the title tasted like absolution in her mouth. I watched her mouth shape words like future and growth and vision, and all I heard was the echo of her other sentence, the one she lodged in my chest. You don't have what it takes to lead. I went to bed before her and stared at the ceiling fan until it turned into a blurred halo. The plan wrote itself on the dark. Not rage, not violence, not some cowboy scene out of a cheap movie. Proof, witnesses. A setting she couldn't wriggle out of. If she wanted a stage where leadership mattered, I would choose one where her audience couldn't pretend they didn't hear the truth. Ruth's Chris came to mind first, the last place her parents took us for an anniversary. White tablecloths, crisp as paper verdicts. If her ex liked to strut in rooms like that, I'd let him strut. And I'd let the floor drop out under him when it mattered. I'd invite the people who needed to see, and I'd lay the facts down so clean even the sharpest corporate tongue couldn't cut around them. I rolled onto my side and closed my eyes, and for the first time in weeks, the sentence in my chest didn't hollow me out. It hardened me. She said I didn't have what it takes to lead. I whispered the words back into the darkness like a vow, and let the fan's steady whir count out the hours until morning. Ruth's Chris on a Friday night has its own kind of theater. You walk in and the air smells like sizzling butter and money. The tables are draped in white so clean they reflect the chandeliers, and the waiters glide around like actors who've rehearsed every gesture. I chose it on purpose. If Emily wanted to live in a world of status and polish, if her ex wanted to measure manhood by corner booths and Cabernet, then fine, I'd give them a stage with more eyes than they ever wanted. I didn't go alone. I invited her parents, her younger sister, my folks, and a couple of mutual friends who'd been close enough to notice cracks forming, but polite enough not to say anything. I told them it was a surprise dinner, an early anniversary celebration. They all showed, dressed for the part, smiling at the hostess as we were led to a long table near the center of the room. I made sure the seats were arranged just so, like pieces in a courtroom. I'd been working construction for years, but in that moment I felt like a trial lawyer ready to lay down exhibits A through Z. Emily walked in 5 minutes late with him at her side. She hadn't warned me. She hadn't even bothered to spin a cover story. He wore that same too-perfect suit, and she wore a dress I'd never seen before. Sleek, black, with a slit up the side that felt like a dare. My stomach knotted, but my face didn't move. She froze when she saw the table, when she realized both families were sitting there, smiling, clapping politely. For 1 second, I almost pitied her. Almost. "Emily," I said, standing, voice steady. "Glad you could make it. And you brought a guest." She stammered. The ex smiled like he owned the joint, shook my father's hand, then leaned down to whisper something to Emily that made her eyes flicker with panic. The kind of panic that said, "He doesn't know what's coming." We ordered drinks. The conversation strained at first, but people tried. Her mom asked the ex about his job. He puffed up, launched into a monologue about mergers and leadership strategies. My dad nodded politely, but shot me a look across the table, the look a man gives his son when he knows he's about to swing a hammer. I let him talk, let him spout about executive material, while Emily's eyes darted from me to the wine list, like maybe she could drink herself invisible. When the steaks arrived, I pulled the manila envelope from under my chair and laid it gently on the table. The chatter faded. Knives hovered above plates. The ex chuckled nervously. Emily's face drained of color. "I thought tonight we'd celebrate honesty," I said. My voice carried farther than I expected. Heads at neighboring tables tilted just enough to catch the scent of scandal. "Since leadership seems to be the word of the year, let's lead with the truth." I opened the envelope and fanned out the evidence like a deck of cards. Receipts, photos, timestamps. One by one, I slid them across the tablecloth until they formed a trail from one end to the other. Emily's hand shot out to grab them, but I was faster. "No, sweetheart, let's not hide what's already been seen." Her father leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, his face shifting from confusion to fury in slow motion. Her mother gasped, a hand flying to her chest like she'd been slapped. My mom set down her fork and just stared at Emily with that silent, heavy disappointment only a mother can wield. The ex tried to laugh it off, muttering about how things can be taken out of context. I pointed to the photo of them in the hotel garage, bodies leaning too close to be platonic. Context? Sure. The context is my wife, your hand, and a hotel elevator. Emily broke then. Tears streaked down her cheeks, mascara smudging into black rivers. "It wasn't what it looks like," she cried, the same line cheaters have been recycling since Adam blamed Eve. Her sister whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Her father shoved his chair back so hard it screeched against the floor. Diners turned. The room hushed like a theater when the curtain lifts. The ex tried to recover, sat taller, cleared his throat. "Daniel, I think you're overreacting. Leadership means—" I cut him off. Don't you dare stand here and lecture me about leadership. You may lead boardrooms, but you don't lead with integrity. You sneak around hotels with another man's wife, then call it strategy. That's not leadership. That's cowardice in a tie. The satire kicked in then, uninvited but unstoppable. Maybe it was the absurdity of laying out private betrayal like a PowerPoint presentation over ribeye. Maybe it was the way everyone's faces twisted between shock and fascination, like they were watching a courtroom drama unfold on live TV. I leaned back, gestured at Emily and her ex like a ringmaster introducing circus acts. Ladies and gentlemen, Exhibit A, the faithful wife, Exhibit B, the shining executive. Together, they star in tonight's production, How to Wreck a Marriage in 3 Easy Steps. Tickets are free, but dignity is sold separately. Laughter, awkward, stifled, from a nearby table. The ex's jaw tightened. Emily sobbed harder, whispering my name like it was a lifeline. But I felt no pull, no urge to rescue. I had given her years, sweat, loyalty, and love. She had given me a sentence that cut deeper than a knife. You don't have what it takes to lead. Tonight, I showed her I could lead. Not by following her rules, but by writing my own. The waiter approached, wide-eyed, unsure if he should pour more wine or call security. I waved him off with a calm smile. We're just finishing dinner, I said, but my wife and her guest will be paying the bill tonight. Consider it a leadership exercise. Emily's father stood then, towering over the table, voice trembling with rage. How could you? He hissed at her. In front of everyone? After all he's done for you? Emily buried her face in her hands. Her mother shook her head, unable to speak. My father reached across the table, patted my arm once, a silent verdict. You did right, son. I gathered the papers, slid them back into the envelope, and stood. I don't need to lead you anymore, Emily, I said quietly, but every word landed like a hammer. I'll lead myself. And with that, I walked out. The night air outside felt cleaner than it had in months. The neon glow of the valet stand flickering like freedom itself. Behind me, the restaurant hummed with whispers, forks scraping plates. The echo of betrayal turned spectacle. Ahead of me, the Ford waited, dented but loyal, engine ready. I climbed in, turned the key, and for the first time since her sentence pierced me, I felt whole. The first few weeks after that dinner at Ruth's, Chris felt like stepping out of a burning house and realizing the night air is still breathable. The silence in my apartment in Austin was deafening at first. I'd rented a 1-bedroom off South Congress, a place with peeling paint on the balcony railings and a view of a neon taco sign. But every day that silence started to sound less like loneliness and more like peace. No slammed doors, no lies disguised as late-night emails. Just me, a pot of coffee in the morning, and the hum of traffic below. Emily tried reaching out almost immediately. The first was a text, "Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Then an email. Paragraphs about how the ex had pressured her, how she'd been confused, how what I saw wasn't what it looked like. Funny, considering the photos made it look exactly like betrayal. A week later, she showed up outside my work site, makeup smudged, hair wild, like someone who had lost the script of her own movie. "Daniel, please, you don't understand," she begged, her voice cracking as the crew pretended not to stare. "He's not who I thought he was. He's cruel. He used me." I looked at her, really looked, and realized something that shocked me more than the hotel receipts ever had. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no longing, no hunger to forgive, just emptiness, like the part of me that had once loved her had evaporated into the Texas heat. "Emily," I said, steady as the beams we set in concrete, "the man you left me for outshines me, remember? Go chase the light." And I turned back to the blueprints without waiting for her reply. That was the moment I understood revenge had already done its job, not in humiliating her, but in releasing me. She was the one chained to her choices now, not me. Still, in darker hours, I laughed at the absurdity of it all, how American it felt, almost cinematic, a steakhouse showdown, a wife who thought leadership was measured in job titles, an ex-quarterback turned executive strutting like a Wall Street peacock. Sometimes I'd lie awake at night and wonder if I'd accidentally wandered into a parody of my own life. Like, maybe the whole thing was a pilot episode for one of those Reddit Betrayal Stories channels on YouTube, where some guy with a smooth voice reads about cheating wives and revenge tales while comments flood in. "Damn, bro, you did the right thing." At the conspiracy theorist in me even joked, half to myself, half to my buddies over beers, that her ex must have been part of some secret leadership cult. Illuminati for CEOs, I called it. You cheat with them, and suddenly you get promoted. That's how corporate America works. They laughed, but in the laughter there was a sting of truth. Isn't betrayal its own kind of initiation ritual in this country? Affairs behind tinted glass, power moves sealed with lies, broken families swept under corner office rugs. But life has a way of balancing its books. 3 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Emily's ex had been caught skimming funds from his company's expense accounts. Not jail time, but close. A career nosedive that left him hustling consulting gigs on LinkedIn, trying too hard to look unbothered. Emily, last I heard, was back living with her parents, her executive material stripped down to nothing more than a line in a resume no one wanted to read. Me, I was moving up. Funny thing, when the senior manager at my firm retired suddenly, the company needed someone who knew the crews, who could keep projects on time without bleeding budgets. My name came up. Not the college grad with the MBA, not the guy with the glossy shoes, me. The same man Emily swore wasn't leadership material. I got the promotion, a raise, a small office with a window that looked out at the cranes swinging across the skyline. And when I walked onto the site in the mornings, hard hat tucked under my arm, the men looked at me differently. Not because I'd changed, but because I'd stayed. That's leadership, not hotel lobbies and slick speeches, staying when the concrete cracks, when the weather ruins your schedule, when everyone else folds. Emily never understood that. Maybe she never wanted to. I even started dating again, cautiously at first. A woman named Rachel, a school counselor with a laugh that didn't sound rehearsed. She liked diners more than steakhouses, pickup trucks more than Porsches. She didn't care if my hands were calloused or my jeans had dust on them. With her, I felt like Daniel again, not the husband constantly on trial, not the man measured against a ghost, just me. And yet, I couldn't resist poking fun at my own story. One night, sitting on my balcony with Rachel, sipping Lone Star beers, I told her the whole saga. When I got to the part about the Ruth's Chris dinner, she nearly spit her drink laughing. "You're kidding," she said. "You actually dropped evidence on the table like a courtroom drama?" I grinned. Swear on my truck keys. It was better than any Netflix series. Half the restaurant was watching. She shook her head, still laughing. You know that's the stuff people read on Reddit, right? Betrayal diaries, revenge fantasies. You lived it. She was right. I had become my own revenge story. A living, breathing cautionary tale with a Texas drawl. And maybe that was okay. Maybe, in a world where people scroll past endless cheating wife threads, family drama sagas, and infidelity stories, mine was just another one. But it was mine, and I walked out with my dignity intact. The final time Emily tried to reach me, months later, she left a voicemail I never returned. Her voice was ragged, desperate. "Daniel, please, I made a mistake. I see it now. You were the only one who really loved me. I'm begging you." I listened once, then deleted it. Because the truth is, revenge wasn't about punishing her. It wasn't about parading her shame. It was about proving to myself that I could survive the sentence she thought would break me. You don't have what it takes to lead. That line used to hollow me out. Now it makes me smile, because I know better. Leadership isn't something you inherit from a resume or from an ex-quarterback's shadow. It's something you build day by day, slab by slab, nail by nail, choice by choice. It's not glamorous, it doesn't always shine, but it stands when the rest falls. So now, when I drive my F-150 down I-35 with the windows rolled down and George Strait playing on the radio, I don't think about Emily. I don't think about her ex. I don't even think about the steakhouse spectacle that set me free. I think about peace, about how quiet it feels to breathe without someone else's judgment pressing against your ribs. And maybe I laugh a little too, imagining some stranger on Reddit stumbling across my story years from now, typing, "Cheating wife told her husband he wasn't leadership material. Big mistake. Guy exposed her in front of the family at Ruth's Chris. Classic." Because in the end, peace is sweeter than revenge. But revenge sure makes one hell of a story.